So, should we? Oh, here people are finally coming in. Yeah, let's just get to it. These quartets this week have been knocking me out, and I told you this is my 5th radio. This is the first time I've gone around this cycle. You guys have done it 7 or 8 times at least with your quartet year, right?
Well, so yeah, this is the Miró Quartet's 8th complete live Beethoven cycle.
Wow.
And then, of course, we've recorded them all. Before joining the Miró Quartet, I was part of 2 different quartets. So actually, the Borromeo Quartet is where Bill and I met, and I tried to find the number, but I think we played this cycle about 23 times. And then I'm one of the rare violinists also, we haven't talked about this, who was also a first violinist in a high-level professional quartet, and I also did them once as a first violinist. So this a couple times around the sun. Fry Street Quartet. Yeah. So it's always an incredible journey, and I think what's so special about these quartets, we get to spend hours through every season. These quartets for us are always programmed individually throughout the season, but when you get to hear them in the way that you're hearing them and you hear them unfold in the compositional order of Beethoven's life, you really start to make connections through them that aren't made until you really sit and hear or play a cycle. And I think for the quartet, it's a fascinating experience each and every time, because the audience, we feed off of that. And again, you're going through this huge novel or set of novels that then you are making connections each and every time that you would think we'd know everything. But I remember 20 years ago, it was about 25, Bobby Mann of the Juilliard Quartet was wrapping up his career after 50 years of playing these quartets. And the NPR reporter at the time asked him, Mr. Mann, I imagine you know these back and forth and upside down by now. What is it like to play these after 50 years? And he said, we rehearsed right before this, and I found something I'd never heard before. I never knew it was even there. And it really is that type of journey for a string quartet, because the voicing or the inspiration of each player is constantly changing.
Yeah, so I think we'll just dive into this stuff. So we got 2 quartets, 132. I love it. You guys are playing in as close as we can figure out to the order in which he composed these, right?
Yeah, so we're actually performing them in the order that he wrote, although this set of quartets were written very closely together. Mm-hmm. But by the way they see the sketches coming together and the movements, the Opus numbers that you see, Opus 132, they were ordered that way for publication. Just like the Opus 18s, for those of you who were here on Monday, we played Opus 18 number 3 to start. And when publishers published these quartets for sale, they were marketing them. And so they rearranged them in an order that they thought would sell the set the best. However, Opus 132 was the first of this set that he completed, which is why it's first tonight. And we'll do Opus 130 following that, and then hop to Opus 131 on Sunday afternoon.
Well,
should we hear a little bit?
Yeah, let's plunge in. 132, funny, Gary keeps looking for antecedents in Haydn. Haydn likes sometimes to use slow movements to start his symphonies and his quartets. Not as much as Gary seems to think. It's not quite as common as that. For example, we'll go into it, but this is one of those ones that does start with a slow introduction, which is only 8 measures long, and it's all kind of under your breath. It's marked pianissimo. Starts with the cello, plays a couple notes, and then viola comes in, then the second and the first. There's a little swell up and down, then pianissimo again, another little swell, and then piano, and then crescendo into an allegro. Let's play that far. Play into the faster music from the opening. This is the opening of 132, if I get, let's see.
Yeah, well, and let me just say one thing that I think if you start to track this quartet, the Opus 130, this whole evening, and then the first half of Sunday's concert is all based on the same four-note motif, which is the first 4 notes that you'll hear in the cello. And those 4 notes will actually find their their way into every single movement you hear tonight. So by the time you get to the end of the concert in the Grosse Fuge tonight, these same 4 notes will be appearing. So they're going to haunt you through your dreams tonight. No, I'm kidding. You ready? Let's hear it.
Schoenberg wrote a really interesting analysis of this work. One of the things he knows is that the cello part goes, dee-da-dee-dum, and then before that he goes, da-da-da-dum. It's an inversion of it, turned it upside down, turned it on its head. Schoenberg was fascinated with stuff like that. So was Beethoven. So here's the opening now of 132, if I can get the little Bluetooth gods to help us. Here it goes. Okay, now we're down on that G sharp, A, F, E. That's the story. Those 4 notes. Here we go. So what do we hear there? What does the opening feel like to you? Do you have a mood? There's no wrong answer to this. It's just how did if you stop to think of it, or maybe you thought, oh, I finally got out of traffic and now I'm just sitting down there and this guy wants me to be thinking about stuff. No, what is that? Okay, let's just listen to it once again, then I'll ask you this question. But as you go through, notice how many moves he's making. He gets the opening very soft stuff. It gets almost very loud. Then all of a sudden the first violin sounds like he's going, man, slow. Those shifts are a staggering, almost violent contrasts. Let's hear again. Keep going. Thank you. Crescendo, diminuendo. Yeah. So, anybody volunteer? What's that opening music sound like to you? Is it a...
Yeah, over here.
It sounds like collapse.
Collapse.
I don't know what that is. I should, I guess.
C-O-L-A-P-S-E.
Oh, collapse. I thought you said kalaf. Okay. Yeah, it could be. Mm-hmm. Let me just see happy or sad. It could really be like child's prayer. It's kind of a dark, isn't it? Yeah, I find that a bit ominous too. You don't quite know what's going to happen, but you're not sure it's major or minor, but they're 2 half steps at either end. Sol, la, fa, mi. They're both half steps, and it goes on like that. Those are a little tight. They make us not quite feel at home. And then when the violin explodes, and then you get back that same F natural E, and then that's a kind of figure leaning. Sometimes you hear the word appoggiatura. Sometimes you lean on a note that's slightly dissonant and then release it, or move it to less dissonant note. Pretty amazing, the opening of that. Let me play a little bit more of that, and then we'll go on to another movement. I think we'll try that. Yeah.
One of the things that I think, just to put into context, is Beethoven is completely deaf and has not heard a sound now for many years. He's just had his Beethoven's 9th symphony success. And he's also been through, I think we'll probably talk about this more with the slow movement, a lot of personal struggles. his health has been really, really challenging. And his nephew, who he's very close to, has tried to commit suicide twice. There's been a lot of strife there. And so, you can start to hear some of these emotions and also the ups and downs, the quick shifts through this kind of, through all of these movements, but in particular this one.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, I'm going to play that opening section and let it go in just a little further so you see how the movement develops. Then we'll go into some of the other movements. But, I can borrow back the microphone. Yep. I keep forgetting this. No buts about it. This is really interesting stuff. And the way he does it is alternately very challenging and then very simple. He lets us get it. This is not one of the impossible quartets. You're going to hear with the Grosse Fuge, there's some puzzles which are very hard to unwrap. Oh, let me go and we'll play about 2 minutes of this now. It's the cello in a high register now.
Second violin solo.
What's happening there?
Second violin solo, that's all you need to know. Oh, yeah. But as you can see, it's an entirely different character we've landed in here. And he's working through all of these emotions that he's had, that he's gone through. I mean, he should have died. People with his disease died by the thousands, and he miraculously survived. And so there's celebration, there's grief, there's suspense, all wrapped in here. And of course, the second violin solo is the happy one, right? Yeah.
Well, actually, he's smart enough to know if it's just nothing but doom and gloom, you're going to lose your audience. I use that phrase that the jazzers use, too hip for the room. You don't be too hip for the room. You don't be so sophisticated and so cool and so complicated that nobody can understand what you're after. They may come around to it, but you may be getting really tired. You may be too old never to get a paycheck out of it by the time they get it. All right, I think we're going to move to another movement now. So that first movement is remarkable to me in many ways. The passion in it, and it's a big piece, not huge. We'll see some huge pieces before we're done here. We have already. Let's hear a little bit of the next movement, which is marked Allegro ma non tanto. What's that mean?
Who knows? I mean,
not too much.
Not too much. Yeah. Allegro, but not too much. And here he's playing with that minor second. We heard that F to E, and throughout this quartet, actually, you can track that F to E to the very last 3 or 4 phrases where he turns it to F sharp to E and says, hey, not such a big deal. But for about 40 minutes, that F to E is very grinding. And in this movement, you'll hear that half step appear all over the place. And this movement is sort of like an odd little dance So it's actually a little bit of a waltz. It's in the 3/4, and then there's a trio section to it, again, where he flips the character. Here it comes.
Just for a second, because we've got so much more stuff to get to. That's fun. Let's see what happens just ahead. Usually, dance movements like that usually have a middle section. Does this have a trio? I can't remember.
It does. It's a really fun, beautiful trio where actually we'll all be dancing around in this one, people taking all the different parts, mixing it up, and then it will come to a finish, and suddenly out of nowhere, you have this 2 violins just play. Some people think it sounds a little bit like bagpipes because there's a drone that goes underneath it. And out of that, then, he transforms your emotional state again, and then gets back to work passing that around. Comes back, wraps it, and then we circle around to the same section that you just heard again, which sets us up for the third movement.
And the third movement is Something to Behold. It's one of the great sacred pieces. I'm not really very good at talking about it. I love it to pieces. It moves me deeply. He gives us some title. He's been in very poor health. He went to the baths at Baden. That helped a little bit, but mostly it just took time, and he got better, and he was thankful. But not to God exactly. He says, I'm thanking the Gottheit, which is more like the divinity. He'd grown up in Bonn, which is sort of like the Madison, Wisconsin of the late 18th, 19th century. I mean, it was like everybody was sort of talking about too hip for the room. They were cooler than we are. And they wouldn't talk about God very much, but divinity was okay to talk about. And so he says, Heilige Dankgesang eines Genesenen an die Gottheit, on the God figure. And he writes, and in der liturgische Tonart, it's in the key, or the tone of a, how can we describe Lydian mode?
Well, Gary had a slide here. Here you go. What is Lydian mode? And so in the, what Beethoven actually uses here is a piece of chant where prior to us having key signatures, D major, C major, all of those, A minor, actually we had these different modes. And so Beethoven chooses the Lydian mode for this setting. And then he also chooses a piece from the literature that everybody of the time would know. And each, like you were saying about religion, everybody would have their own relationship to it. But the setting of this would take them back into all of these memories or relationships to that. And so the Lydian mode, number 5 there, is sort of like, if when you look at a piano, you have all the white keys, right? And so each of these modes have different places where the whole and the half steps will fall.
So think of them as a set of scales, essentially. If you put your finger down on the middle C and you play the C major scale, has a fancy name, Ionian. All these are old Greek names. They don't really have anything to do with any, that some medieval theorist gave them those names. But A minor, Aeolian, D minor, which is probably the most common of them, that's not major nor minor. I asked some of the kids when they were here, young kids were here, do you know the song, What Should We Do with a Drunken Sailor? Yeah. Help me out with this. Hey, hey, up she rises, hey, hey, you know,
up she rises, hey, hey, up she rises,
early in the morning. That's pure Dorian mode. You should start on D and go dee da 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 D. That B natural there. D, you expect a B flat. D minor would have a B flat. Lydian mode has a B natural. It's an unexpectedly bright note, and it's a beautiful touch. So that's easier to hear. With Lydian, it's da 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 sharp 4, which the medieval theorists called the devil's music. Diabus in musica, they said. But you know who really loves it? Starting in the late 90s, well, a lot of people. Liszt, Beethoven a little bit, but then it gets to people like Stravinsky and to, West Side Story. Maria, that's a sharp 4. That's a happy sharp 4. But dee-dee, dee-dum, da-dee, dee-dum, those are all sharp 4s. Interesting. So that's the same as Beethoven's Lydian mode. Beethoven's Lydian mode is much more spiritual. How can you talk about this, the sense of this music?
Yeah, I think it's what you'll find out in the framework is he returns to this 3 times. So he has our Lydian mode chorale. It's very much a chorale, which has 2 parts to it. One that moves a little bit, and one that really just sits, just like a chorus would sing chords. And so in each of these sections, the 3 sections that frame it, you'll hear those 2 going back and forth. And then he has in between them 2 sections, which he tells you new life, which is, you can kind of imagine having been trapped in a bed with all sorts of terrible things going on, the feeling of just opening up the windows and breathing fresh air, or going for a walk and having the sun actually touch your body. And these are very uplifting and very shocking almost to come out of this very much like a meditation that you've been in. And so those, you start with the chorus and then go to a new life, reflect, go to a new life, and end with reflection. And it's about an 18-minute movement, but it's perhaps one of his greatest slow movements of these late quartets. Of course, you could make that argument for any of the slow movements we're going through in these next couple days.
But this one catches people's mind in a way that nothing else does. It shows up in the book Point Counterpoint. Shows up in the book Point Counterpoint by Aldous Huxley, and in the most amazing way, it's set in the 1920s in England. There's a lot of labor unrest after the war, and there's a labor leader who's sitting in his apartment listening to a recording of the Budapest Quartet playing this movement, and he's listening to it over and over and over again. And meanwhile, an assassin is coming up, enters the door of his apartment, and kills him, murders him to this music. I don't know if that could be bad dreams or not.
Now I know what I'm thinking about on stage.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
Well, let's hear the music. In the Beethoven, so this is feelings of thanks to the Godheit, to the divinity, and then we'll hear Neue Kraftfühlen, new feelings of strength. We'll get that far, these 2 parts. That's F major. That's the home key of the Lydian. His tempo mark here, molto adagio, extremely slow. These are quarter notes, less than 1 per second. Hairpins up and down. Now he's in a case. That's C major there. That actually feels like home key to me. Does it to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's in canon. The parts are imitating, like row, row your boat at a very high spiritual level. Now A major, here. It's another world, huh? Feeling new life, neue Kraft feeling. Pointing out a problem. When I start listening to music, I never ever stop. This cost me one relationship with a very nice soprano. And now, for over 30 years, I've been with this fantastic jazz singer who can also play Beethoven very beautifully, and she humors me. Yeah. What time is it now?
It's about 6:37. So I'm wondering, maybe we should...
We should move ahead, but that, put that one in your forever pouch. The Holy Song of Thanks, Heilige Dankgesang. You'll find people writing that, I mean, T.S. Eliot, smart people write it, and including just that suggestion in poetry. I mean, Eliot also writes, Mild und leise, and you're supposed to know that's Tristan and Isolde. These things become sacred tokens in a way. And it's cool. Guess what? The people in this room, we get it. You wouldn't be here listening to hour after hour of Beethoven if you didn't get it to begin with. And now it gets deeper and deeper. So thanks, and what fun to do it together.
Yeah. Should we just wrap up Opus 132?
Yeah, what do you want to say?
What you'll go through after that is Beethoven sometimes likes to really slam you into something completely different, which you'll experience in 130. However, to wrap up 132, he actually creates a series of small transitions. So there's a quick little march. It feels very operatic almost, what we go through. So there's this very quick little march, and then suddenly you're in a recitative, and there's an orchestra, and the first violinist is going crazy with a big solo. And then everything freezes, and then you start the fifth movement. And that's a very turbulent, tumultuous, there's a lot of angst, and he's sort of getting out a lot of different energy in that final movement. And at the end turns happy. So that F natural to E that we talked about right at the beginning that makes us feel so intense or suspenseful, actually he twists it right around, and maybe it's a joke or maybe it's the release. And that experience, I think, is for each one of us to decide. And that brings us to a flurry and into intermission, which launches us into 130. So Opus 130 is a very different type of quartet. You'll notice he's expanding the amount of movements that we have, right? So all the quartets, I think, if my memory serves up till now, have had the traditional 4 movements. Opus 132 has 5. Opus 130, the next quartet after intermission, will have 6. And an extra movement, which we'll talk about in a second. On Sunday afternoon, the first one will have 7. So he's expanding this form and taking things and twisting them. Now, Opus 132 is more developed in a way like you have the earlier quartets that you've heard so far. Opus 130 is a series of character movements that really has two pillars. The first movement is quite substantial, and then the last movement, Grosse Fuge, is also quite substantial. And then in between it, you have these character movements. So the second movement is a very fleet, flying, you'll see a lot of pyrotechnics from our first violinist, Daniel. And it's actually one of the shortest movements Beethoven ever wrote. It's about 3 minutes. The only movement shorter you will hear on Sunday in Opus 131, which is about 49 seconds. But then the third movement of Opus 130 has more of a dance and more of a lilt to it. We kind of return to these classical dances. Just like the fourth movement. The fifth movement is a very special movement. I'm not sure what you want to play, so I'll just talk through everything, then we can choose.
Well, we're getting to the cavatina, so we have to talk about that. Set that up.
So the fifth movement is the cavatina, which is the slow movement, and many would call the heart and soul of this particular quartet.
It's a song, cavatina. It's a vocal piece.
So this now is the second violin, and they loop around. So you hear this interchange between the two thematic instruments in the quartet, and back to the first violin.
I'm trying to make a fade under you.
Yeah.
So very sparkful.
I know one of the slides Gary has here is it was chosen to go up among the works on the Voyager spacecraft. And it's another one of these works where Beethoven works the magic of humanity and spirit and soul all together. And it's actually very operatic in its form as well, in that the first violinist most of the time serves as the soloist. And the orchestral parts, including thematic lines, are handled by the other three. And inside of this is a marking that Beethoven has only used in this particular quartet, beklemmt. Do you want to talk about beklemmt?
Yeah. Anybody speak Yiddish? We found a couple people, people say, oh, I'm verklempt. It's like I'm distressed, I guess. We need Leo Rosten to really get more flavor out of it, but you get the idea. But beklemmt is worse than that. It's like when you can't even catch your breath. It's like you're choking. And you can hear it in the violin. The violin starts, there's this kind of triplet pattern in the low three instruments, right? The triplets, show a tempo there.
Yum, bum, bum.
Slow triplets.
Bum, bum,
so that's the setup. And then the violin comes in, up a fourth, and it's like he's choking. He can barely bring out the notes. That's it. And then after a while, he regains his footing. And this piece ends very softly.
This quartet is unusual because it actually has two final movements, and you have to choose one. So the short story behind that is Beethoven wrote this quartet with the movement you'll hear tonight, the Grosse Fuge, as the final movement. And during this period of his life, Beethoven was restudying all of the works of Bach. He was in love with the music of Bach, and so he wrote this tremendous fugue, the Great Fugue, basically, to end it. And it's about 15 minutes, and it has the intensities of everything you can imagine. Very much still sounds like modern music in many places today, with all of the things our ears have heard. The publisher, well, in the debut performance, they would normally encore movements, and Beethoven was at a bar down the street and was furious.
He couldn't stand to be in the room when it was performed.
Yeah, he was so nervous and also just concerned how it would go. And you can imagine, you know, the Cavatina was, I think, encored twice, but the Grosse Fuge, they didn't like it. And we don't know how well it was performed. It's an extremely challenging technical piece for a quartet. And the publisher was then very worried that he wouldn't be able to sell these quartets. And so after about 9 months of his friends and the publisher really pushing Beethoven to reconsider, Beethoven relented after, it's rumored, after he was offered another fee for the extra movement, to write a separate movement. And that movement is actually the last quartet movement he wrote in his life, and actually I think the last full composition he finished, which you'll hear at the very end of Sunday's concert. He composed it as an easier movement, although you can ask any of my colleagues, it is one of the hardest little buggers out there.
It's Canadian talk.
But it completely changes the structure of this piece when you play it. So we play it both ways, but our preferred performance is what you'll be hearing tonight, which is with the Grosse Fuge. So what you'll feel at the end of this movement is the shock of Beethoven, because he will wake you right up from your solace into the Grosse Fuge. And for those of you the first time hearing the Grosse Fuge, I want you to know that you'll be okay. What he writes is, it can be viewed in so many ways. Over the years, we've played it with great joy. Basically, the first 4 to 6 minutes, he marks fortissimo. He pits every single player against each other or with each other, however you want to view it. And so I've had conversations with great quartets about how this is such a joyous celebration. And in true Beethoven form, everything fits exactly. So he's using rhythms that nothing should be exactly right together to celebrate the individuality, but also what can be made of bringing everybody together. And some people feel it is him just getting out every single emotion you can imagine at once. But after that section of great fortissimo, he actually then drops you into an equal section of triple pianissimo, or just pianissimo, I think, and very, very quiet music. And then we end up with some dancing, and he takes you on a journey from there. And so it is, both of these quartets, I think, are just journeys that are going to be an experience all to themselves. That Beethoven is going to contribute. Each one of you in the audience will bring yourself to it. And so with the fugue, I encourage you to let go and know that we'll take care of you on the other end. And we will look forward afterwards to chatting you through it. What would you like to say?
You said it very, very well. Thanks to Bill for sitting in at the last minute, help us out when Gary wasn't able to be here.
Well, and
What fun. Wonderful.
And of course, thank you to Bill.
Thanks for joining us. It's going to be a great concert.